How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and I am joined, as always, by our favorite Best Buy open box television, Christian Slater. Christian, how was this past week for you?
Dude, watching you run around last night after you sliced your finger open was hilarious. Blood was going everywhere, and you were all like, where are the Band-Aids? Where are the Band-Aids? And then I went to hand one to you, and at the last moment, I threw the whole box in the toilet. Man, we had some good times around here.
Yes, great times. You are immensely helpful. I have no idea how I would accomplish simple everyday tasks without your assistance. Thank you so much. But yes, video games happened this week, and I got a handful of them. Let's see, where do we want to start with? I guess we'll start with Robocop. So the full game's not out, but the demo for Robocop Rogue City was released, and it kind of took everybody by surprise, I want to say, to a certain degree. I don't think that many people had high hopes for this game. I know that the company's previous game, this is Nacon making it, they had that like cult classic Terminator game that came out a couple years ago. But you know, when the Robocop game trailer for for this game came out, I saw it and I was like, okay, you know, it looks like a CGI Robocop trailer, you know, whatever. And then they said, you know, I saw who was making it and I saw that it was first person, and I was like, I don't really know if I want a first person shooter Robocop game. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily what I'm looking for right now. But then, you know, the demo came out. I had no plans really of covering it, of playing it, anything to that degree, but I saw the response from people online, and it was really kind of blowing up over the past week. So I was like, well, I guess I should probably download this thing, and you know, if I'm going to play it, might as well make a video out of it. And I gotta say, I was very pleasantly surprised. It's a very long demo. We only did, what, a half hour-ish of it for the channel, just to kind of give, you know, a good look of what it is. But it gets like way more in depth. It's a couple hours, 3 hours long, something like that. And it's really honestly got me pretty excited for the full game. Like, I am anxiously looking forward to playing the full release. Comes out next month at some point, which is nice because November is kind of bare. This week, this coming week's like the big week for October. And then like Alan Wake is next week, I believe. And then that's kind of it until Call of Duty. There's a couple other things that are coming out, of course, you know, between now and the end of the year. But in terms of like what I'm really interested in terms of stuff that I'll be, you know, covering and talking about on the channel, you know, it really starts to dry up after Call of Duty. So Robocop is going to be a really nice, a nice surprise, you know, for November, and a good way to end the year, you know, once we get through that. And then it's just time, you know, it's just gonna be a lot of like cleanup, a lot of maintenance stuff to just try and finish stuff before Game of the Year. I was looking at calendars and schedules and all that stuff. I think I'm going to try and have Game of the Year out this year on December 15th, I believe, is kind of the goal right now. And so I've been doing a lot of planning work for that and trying to just get through games. Like, you know, last week wrapped up Starfield. Spent a lot of time, I'm not going to talk about it this week because it's not really relevant, but spent a lot of time in the Mortal Kombat 1 story mode over the past couple of days to try and get closer to finishing that off. Got to get through Phantom Liberty with Cyberpunk and all that. But yeah, now having Robocop slotted in there, like in some ways it's good and bad, right? It's bad because it's like, oh, there's another game I got to get through, but good in the sense it's like, oh shit, we're going to have like a really solid Robocop game. You know, it's got its flaws, you know, it's like a B level game, you know, it's not a AAA title. But I think that it's got enough personality that you're going to instantly kind of look through a lot of those issues. Now, obviously, if the gameplay loop eventually kind of wears down and that's all you're doing for however long this game is going to be, you know, it's going to certainly kind of weigh against it. But I think initially, like right off the bat, the first thing you notice is that the facial animations on the characters are pretty rough. But you very quickly forget about it when you see like how great the art style is, the direction that they're taking the game. They really are paying a very loving tribute to the Robocop movies. I initially thought that this game took place between like 1 and 2. for the movies, but it turns out it actually takes place post 2. So Nuke is still a thing, despite the fact that Kane is gone, and all that. So that, you know, it's an interesting thing. Allows them to have a lot of the characters from the movies in there. Peter Weller reprises his role as RoboCop. I believe he is probably the only person back. I didn't get a chance to go into IMDb, but just audibly hearing voices, definitely not the same people. And I think some of the people have since passed away that were involved with those movies. But I really can't suggest checking out the demo enough. I don't know how long the demo will be up there. It's weird because it released around the same time as Steam Next Fest, which is their big demo event, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And a lot of those demos are timed. They will go away. I think today, the day that you are watching this, a lot of them will be gone, but some of them stay up there. For this game in particular, with how well it's been received and with how much people have been talking about it and playing it, I would say it would be a huge disservice to the game if they took the demo down. So I would hope that it would stay up for a little bit. But yeah, I would say it really goes against what you'd think this game is going to be. It doesn't do anything crazy. It's not reinventing the wheel, but if you have a connection to those characters, if you have an appreciation for that art, design, and style of the movies translating over to a game, I would highly recommend it. Christian, I know you had some thoughts on RoboCop. I mean, hey, you were acting around the time that those movies were popular, right? What's on your mind, man?
Needs more animation for dick shots. I mean, they have to know that everyone is going to be trying to shoot as many dicks as possible in this game.
Yeah, it felt like when I was aiming at dicks, there were a couple of maybe like doubled over animations. Kind of looked like a nut punch kind of thing. But yeah, there should definitely be many penile related animations to this game. So I'm right there with you on that one. And then speaking of penises, probably the biggest actual full game that came out over the past week was the new Forza Motorsport. I've talked about this kind of ad nauseum on the channel, so it's not really worth rehashing it. But to give you the kind of TLDR, I have kind of shifted away from sim racing games more to the arcade side. So I wasn't really sure how well I was going to receive this Forza. There's a video up on the channel if you want to check it out. Do a couple of races in there, and my opinions haven't really changed too much, but the thing that's really surprising to me with this game is I haven't put it down. I'm still playing it. I'm hours and hours and hours into it at this point. Been playing it every day since it came out. Very kind of surprising because it is very cold and antiseptic feeling. It feels like you were in a museum where you're not allowed to touch things. You're just allowed to look at them. The jokes and certainly guilty of doing them, but the jokes that this is essentially car eroticism. I mean, it really is. They got the, to steal a line from 40-year-old version, they got the car on the pedestal, it really is kind of like just these people that worship speed. I don't know. But the career mode, which is kind of what I've been spending the majority of my time with until I kind of smartened up a couple of nights ago, is it's a slow burn. You start off with cars that aren't necessarily the most fun to drive. I think that the fact that you can't adjust how many laps the career mode races are is a real disservice to the game, because it gets boring. There are parts of this game that are just super boring at times, because you end up getting so much better than the CPU. And I've cranked the difficulty up, several times since I started, where by like lap 3 out of 5 or lap 3 out of 6, you're just so far in first place that nothing is going to stop you because this game does have a rewind feature. So if you crash, you can just rewind out of it. I guess you could like self-impose restrictions on yourself where you don't do that, but let's be honest, you're going to use that feature if it's available to you. So there are times where it's just a little boring. I was really surprised with the lack of tracks. It's maybe a dozen or so, maybe 12 to 15 tracks total. So there's repeats, and each track, some tracks will have multiple versions of that track. Sometimes it'll be the same track, but you can run it in reverse. So they do some things like that to differentiate things. I was also really surprised. It doesn't really feel like there's a lot of cars in the game. Like there are, like there's at least probably 100 cars, but there's some odd stuff where what I ended up doing was I kind of got out of the career mode and I was just going into like a custom race thing, and you can rent cars that you don't have the money for. So you could do like the crazy like Bugattis or Koenigsberg or Koenigsegg. Is that the company? Yeah, Koenigsegg, I think, is the company. It makes like really high end cars. You know, they have like Salines and McLarens in there and stuff like that. And you can rent them so you don't have to spend the money because you're not going to have a lot of credits when you start. You pretty much, the way the career is set up is at the end of each chapter of the career, you essentially have just enough money to buy a car for the next section of the career mode. To me, I feel like in the career mode, you should just be straight earning money and not have to pay for your cars because you're forced to use these like specific cars for the specific chapter that you're on. So it's like, you can only use a hatchback. You can only use a classic American muscle car, like et cetera, et cetera. They should be giving you a car for each one of those. So that way you can just start banking all this money and then spend it in the free race mode. And then you could, take those cars online or whatever. So that's a little odd to me that they make you buy your cars in their career mode. But I would go into the free race mode and set it up. And for some of these cars, there's only like one of that type of car in the game. And there's very limited like paint jobs. So what will happen is you'll populate a race with like 23 other CPU controlled cars, and they're all the same car with all the same paint job. And it's just like, it totally breaks immersion. It really takes you out of the game. And I was like, this is just kind of disappointing. Like I was really hoping for more here, So that was a little sad. But the actual physical, like driving, like the mechanics of playing the game, I think are pretty tight. The biggest thing that I did was I turned vibration off. I felt like I was fighting with the controller. It was vibrating way too much. I could only imagine if this was a PlayStation game with the way that the adaptive vibration is in that controller, it would feel like it would be like physically uncomfortable in your hands, to play the game. Like I remember, and this is a really weird example because they're definitely not anywhere similar to each other, but Grand Theft Auto 5, when the PS5 version of that came out, when it would rain, the controller would vibrate like the droplets of rain were hitting the controller, and it just made it physically uncomfortable to hold on to that controller and play that game. So you just turn the vibration off. Vibration for me is not like, I don't need that in a game. I'm totally fine with turning it off. If I'm playing like a first person shooter or something like that, like it's off, like I don't want to deal with it. But it got to the point with Forza where I was like, this is impacting my enjoyment of this game. I need to turn this off. But I think the game, there's obviously something to it if I keep coming back to it every night. The past couple of nights, I finish playing a game of 2K, and then it's like, let's go do 2 races in Forza, and I'll go and do 2 races in Forza. And I actually, it's been a couple days since I've even touched the career mode because it's honestly kind of boring. But at the same time, like I said, I can't really explain what's bringing me back to it. I don't know if it's just because here's something to do, and I don't have to think as much as I do with some of the other games that I've been playing. For Mortal Kombat, like I've got to pay attention to those cutscenes because it's telling me a story. I finished Starfield, but with Starfield for the large part, I'm playing that game engaged in the story that it's telling me, but there's no story in a racing game for the, at least this racing game. And so I don't know, maybe it's just one of those things where it's just like, I'm not viewing it so much as a video game, but it's just like an activity to do while I turn my brain off for the night or something like that. But it's a very polished game. I think for people that are like really into it, I think that they will enjoy it. I snuck a peek at some of like the Forza enthusiasts areas of the internet, and it does seem that people for the most part are pretty amped up on it. I did see the same concern I had where people were saying that they didn't understand why you couldn't change the length of races in the career mode. I guess in the previous Forza you could. For me, I was like, oh, I want to turn them down. I only want like 3 laps. And then there are other people who are like, I'm not doing this unless I have 50 laps. So I'm not, I'm definitely not as obsessed as some people are, but I think it's, you know, it's an enjoyable game. Now, I think the big asterisk with this is that it's on Game Pass. If this game was not on Game Pass, I would not be anywhere near it. I certainly would not be spending the money on it. But I think it is a fantastic Game Pass game. And it's one of those games where it's not going to sell systems. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's been waiting for Forza to come out to buy an Xbox. Like, that's always the case with any kind of major release. But it's not a big system seller. But what it is it is a really nice piece to get people involved with Game Pass. Because the biggest strength of Game Pass, aside from being like a wonderful service that ultimately, like, if you really think about it in the grand scheme of things, costs less than like a Netflix subscription and gives you all these games to play and all the Microsoft first party stuff on day one, which you don't get. Like, you don't get day one movies on Netflix unless they're made by Netflix. Well, I guess actually it's a bad. It sort of works because they're made by Microsoft and they're made by Netflix. But you know, Netflix has non Netflix made movies on it. You know, it's not like Oppenheimer is coming to streaming day one or something like that. Is I guess the better example to use. But when you look at Game Pass as a service, when you buy an Xbox, you know, it used to be when you bought a video game system. And let's say $400, $500, because these days they're $500. It's not just $500, right? Like, you might need to buy an extra controller. Well, there's 60 to 70 bucks there, but you're also, what do you need? You need games. Now, of course, back in the day, systems a lot of time came with the game. Super Nintendo came with Super Mario World or Donkey Kong Country or Killer Instinct or whatever it was. But then we kind of got away from that for a while. And, you know, there'd be after like year one, you know, for the second Christmas that the system was out, you know, maybe they do a new bundle that has a game with it. But, you know, these days, I remember when I bought my PS4, it was like, well, I gotta go get a PS4. And those were what, $400? And then, well, I'm going to have to get 2-3 games. There's another $180 on top of it. And, you know, if you were out buying an Xbox right now, it's like, well, I could just buy this Xbox for $500 or a Series S or, you know, for less. And, oh, I just have to give them $20 and I get the ability to play games online and hundreds of games that I can just download, including Starfield and Forza and all the Gears of Wars and Halo and, you know, all these amazing titles. It's like, that's such an amazing value. And Forza just bolsters that because, you know, racing as a genre is an important genre in the history of video games. People that aren't usually into racing games will usually check out a racing game. Like, I want to play a racing game. Like, a lot of times they are just fun to pick up and play. Now, if you're just a casual player and you're maybe used to something, you know, much more outlandish like Mario Kart, like, you're probably going to pick up Forza Motorsport for an afternoon or something and then delete it off your system and move on with your day. But it's nice to have there, and there are people that it is going to be a big draw for them. So I think that's kind of the more important thing with this. But yeah, I recommend checking it out, but it's one of those things where think about it like this. I'm not super into sim racing games, so it's not necessarily appealing to every desire I have for a racing game. It may to yours. And also, you know, I am somebody that if this did cost money, you know, outside of the small financial hit that I take for paying for Game Pass, you know, I wouldn't be purchasing it. So kind of take that as you will. All right, next up, there'll be a video on the channel about this tomorrow, but the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 beta is going on. I decided not to pre-order this game. I didn't really see a need to. Last year, you know, I was super into trying to like get through the battle pass. And I've done that for the past couple of Call of Duties where I was like, I think I'm gonna get really into the battle pass because I was playing online quite a bit. So it just seemed like, oh, I might as well do this. But I've kind of realized that I just don't really interact with that battle pass stuff all that much. So paying, you know, an extra $30 to get the first battle pass and whatever DLC weapons or skins or whatever just wasn't, I just didn't need to do that this year. And also up until very recently, like they really hadn't confirmed what was going to be in Modern Warfare 3. And I think I was also kind of burned on, you know, the way they handled Modern Warfare 2 last year. You know, I was really buying into what they said where, hey, we're not going to make one of these for a couple of years. So this is going to be it. This is going to be our platform for a little while. And we're going to build upon this. And Modern Warfare 2, man, like once the, kind of the shiny new toy aspect wore off after a couple of weeks, I was I was just not into it. I thought the maps were terrible. Like, to me, out of, I haven't played every Call of Duty, but I play most of them. It is one of my favorite franchises of all time. I genuinely think that last year's game was the worst map selection ever. I thought none of those maps were super memorable. There are maps that I had a good time playing on at times, but my favorite map on that game was Shipment. And Shipment's been around forever. It's not exclusive to that game. So I just didn't care. And it after a couple of months, I was done. That game came out, November last year, maybe the end of October. And after January, I think I was pretty much done with it after January. I really, in my mind, I've made this connection to Call of Duty being a Thanksgiving, Christmas type thing. It's, during the winter months, it gets colder out. I like to, play Call of Duty at night. It's just this thing that I've done for years and years and years. So it's kind of created that bond in my head. So, I'm going to play it and I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. But, I was a little concerned that they weren't giving out a lot of information, and, stuff started leaking and you're like, well, is this true? And is it not true? And they finally confirmed stuff. So the big draw for me with this new Call of Duty is it's kind of what we were supposed to get with the last game, and that was remastered original Modern Warfare 2 maps, like Favela and High Rise and all that stuff. And it makes no sense whatsoever why they're doing this for Modern Warfare 3. They should have done this for Modern Warfare 2, and then I guess if they wanted to remaster Modern Warfare 3 maps for the new Modern Warfare, I don't know. It's a really weird disconnect, but whatever. But they have all these maps in there, and they are the maps that this is my formative years with Call of Duty. I played the original Call of Duties pre-4, where they turned into, like the Modern Warfare stuff. I remember getting the original Call of Duty on PC at launch, and really enjoying it. And I didn't play 4. I just kind of skipped it because at the time I just wasn't really interested in the modern setting, I guess. Maybe that's what it was. But I just totally skipped it. But by the time 2 had come out, it was such a cultural sensation after the success of 4 that I went to the midnight release of Modern Warfare 2, and there were hundreds of people in line, and it was a big deal. And my buddies and I, we all bought the game. We drove it back to one of my friend's house at the time, and we played it, and I just kept playing it, and I didn't stop playing it until like 7, 8 in the morning. I have a lot of great memories with that game, and I think what's going to be fun for me is I want to see what changes, if any, they make to these maps. Obviously, it's going to play differently because it's a modern engine applied to these older maps. And for me personally, I'm a better Call of Duty player now than I was back then. I was fairly terrible back then. I'm somewhat solid now, I would say. In my first match during this beta, I was first place on my team. So it's just like the skills just kind of kick back in, and it's nice to, sometimes it's nice to excel at a game. I'm not very good at most video games. I need help with a lot of video games, whether it's a guide or whatever it may be. So to have a game where it's like, yeah, I can kind of hold my own with this one for the most part. Like if I'm up against somebody that really knows what they're doing or spending a lot of time with it, yeah, I'm going to get smoked. But in terms of just playing with a bunch of just random people in an online match, like I can do pretty well. So I think the game looks pretty good. The time to kill is definitely different. It's a lot slower. I like a faster time to kill. I know some people don't like that because it feels like you're dying too fast, but I'm okay with me dying too fast if they're also dying too fast. Like if I'm killing them just as fast as they're killing me, that's good. So this feels a little bit slower in terms of that. And then the actual movement speed, it feels a little bit slower. I don't know if they maybe intentionally tuned it down a little bit to feel like Modern Warfare 2 did originally on these maps. It's been a long, long time since I've played that game, so I honestly can't remember the speed of that game. But this does feel slower. But I think, once I start leveling up and I kind of get the loadout that I'm used to with an SMG, and I'm sure there's going to be some perks that maybe boost movement speed or something like that, I'll be right back on the saddle and totally fine with it. There's been a lot of complaints I saw online with the way you're leveling up and some of the perks and all that stuff. I didn't play enough of the beta yet to really get into that. you know, like I said, I'm going to record later today. I'm going to record some footage of it to be up on the channel tomorrow. So maybe we'll start to see some of that stuff during that, and it'll become a little bit more apparent. But so far, I was happy with the experience that I had. And it's nice to have those classic maps that you have that nostalgic connection to back in rotation. All right, so to wrap things up for what I played, we'll touch upon the Steam Next Fest a little bit. I was hoping to have maybe 2 videos of this up, but it looks like I'm only just going to have the one. There were just too many demos this time that I was interested in, and just not enough time to record them. But I did pull out a handful, and there's a video up on the channel if you want to check that out. But the overall theme that I saw with going through people's recommendations online, and then just going through kind of like the master list on Steam's page, is the 90s Duke Nukem Doom Quake first-person shooter is alive and well, and that is pretty much everybody out there is putting their eggs in this one basket. It is a big thing right now to see all of these games that look like they could have been just ripped off of Duke Nukem Forever.
You know, I auditioned for the role of Duke Nukem. I met up with some tech people and recorded all the lines. Years later, though, I did find out that I was just drunk in a Walmart telling people to shake it on the intercom.
Perfect. I wouldn't expect any less. But yeah, I talk about this a little bit on that video, and I imagine during the Game of the Year discussion, I'm gonna open up quite a bit on this. But this is the year where it's 90s time. We are fully in this 90s nostalgia wave, and it's not the 90s nostalgia wave that you would necessarily expect, right? It's like, let's make our game like Duke Nukem Forever. Let's make our music sound like Smashing Pumpkins. Like, it's not necessarily the direction you thought that this was going to head, because it was inevitable, right? Because even like early 2000s is already there's already a whole crop of new metal bands. But you're really starting to see this with video games. There's been a handful of games over the past couple of years that were doing that very like low polygon count PS1 look, especially like when that Dark Souls or Demon Souls like demake thing came out. You started to see a lot of that stuff going around. There's been a handful of games over the past year, but this year in particular, it looks like it's whole hog time on making everything look like it's Daikatana. Which is just, to me, is just kind of strange, but hey, that's where we're at. Everything old becomes new again eventually. So we're going to ride this out until they pound it into the ground and you don't want to look at it anymore, but that time has not come yet, but I imagine it is coming somewhat soon. But yeah, if you want to see what I played, like I said, the video's up. Uni Racer X, another Crab's Treasure, Go Mecha Ball, which was my big recommendation, and Vaporwave Pinball. I thought 3 out of the 4 were not great, and then Go Mecha Ball was fantastic. Maybe I should have picked some different games to play, maybe, but I thought at least the style and what Street Uni X was going for was really cool. It just, that game is just really poorly made. And it was funny, during the recording of that, I was like, is this licensed music? I've never heard these songs before, but there's a lot of songs I haven't heard. I wonder if these are real bands. And then, you know, you listen to it, it's like, this is pretty polished. This has to be a real band. But I wonder, maybe they actually did get some bands to record some original music for this. And then like the second that thing like touched YouTube, it was like all the bands copyright strike or put a copyright claim on the video. I was like, oh, they are real bands. I've just never heard of them. They are very real. So I thought that gave me a pretty good laugh. But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for what I've been playing. We got some big games coming out this week. This is Super Mario week and Spider-Man week. So kind of a big one, as we transition into the fall and winter months before we kind of hit our lull a little bit, and then in January things kick off again. So pretty solid way to start rounding out the year. But that's going to do it for this part of the show, and we'll be back in just a moment with the news. All right, we are back, and I guess the big news story of the week is that the Activision Blizzard King stuff is finally done and over with. Microsoft has officially made their acquisition of that company official for $69 billion and change. So we can for at least the foreseeable future, hopefully stop talking about it. Oh, I'm sorry, $68.7 billion. Not quite 69 billion, but still the largest acquisition of a company, I believe, in history. I think it is the most money ever spent on an acquisition. So they started really kind of hitting it pretty hard on social media. All the Xbox social media channels were promoting this. They put out a trailer of, kind of the classic Microsoft Xbox franchises, plus the stuff that's coming over from Activision, Blizzard, and King, kind of talking about like, it's all, one big family and all that stuff. Executives from Microsoft and executives from Activision and all that were, singing its praises and all that stuff. And a lot of people are online are obviously pretty upset about this because, they feel like it's just going to be, we're going to be in a cyberpunk future where there's just, 3 companies that own everything, because that's kind of the way it feels with television and movies. And it's becoming a more and more apparent reality in video games. Personally, I think that I'm perfectly fine with this acquisition. I am hoping that Microsoft does a couple of things to this slate of teams that has acquired. One, as I hope they clean things up, because with Microsoft being the size of company they are, with the public perception that they have, I don't think they're going to let a lot of this shit fly that's been going on there. Allegations of sexual abuse and poor working conditions and things like that, and games kind of not getting the support they needed. We've heard definitely from Bethesda saying that Microsoft has helped out quite a lot with giving them the space and time to get things done, allowing them to delay Starfield, to work some stuff out with it. For Larian to get Baldur's Gate 3 running on Xbox platforms, they've sent over, what was it, like 100 developers to help them with getting that work done. So I'm hoping that this will be a positive thing overall, to try and get things settled over at Activision and make things maybe a little bit better. And maybe we start getting some higher quality games at maybe a little bit more frequent rate, because Activision doesn't do a lot outside of Call of Duty these days. They've done a few things here and there. Blizzard's been a little bit more active. World of Warcraft is still going on. They did release a new Diablo this year. They released a new version of Overwatch this year. But some of their franchises are kind of been dormant. Activision owns a lot of IP that they haven't done anything with in a really long time. There's a lot of possibility of what they could do, because Activision has been around for a very, very long time. Activision's heyday originally was doing stuff for the Atari 2600. I think what would be really interesting, because Phil Spencer at Xbox really seems to be pretty big on backwards compatibility, as I'd like to see them maybe sink a little bit of money and try and get some of this Activision back catalog onto Game Pass. See how difficult would it be to acquire music rights to put out the Tony Hawk games, especially if they're not going to do a remaster of the second of the third game. What can we possibly see come of this? The King stuff, they do Candy Crush, and I'm sure they have some other mobile projects. It's not anything I can really speak to, because I don't have a lot of experience with it. But I would like to see them crack open that vault for Activision and see what they can start doing. There are a lot of like PS2 era Activision games that were not great games, but had some interesting ideas, especially with their sports games. And I know that the music licensing is a nightmare, but it would be interesting to see if they could maybe be like, hey, we're going to toss aggressive inline up there, and maybe we have to make some changes or put new songs on the soundtrack or whatever, but just kind of get some of these games that have been lost to time and get them going again. I think it would be really interesting to see. I don't know where the rights lie with this stuff, but see if they could do something like, hey, we're going to do a compilation of 40 Activision Atari era games and just toss it up on Game Pass. I think that, if they really want to make Game Pass be the thing that everybody has to get, getting as many games on there as possible and a wide variety of games, certainly seems to be the way to do that. And I think that having this company that has such a rich back catalog, I think it would be cool to do. We didn't necessarily see that with the Bethesda acquisition. There's been rumors going around of like an Oblivion remake. and stuff like that. You know, we did get those games up on Game Pass. Like, you can play Morrowind down there and all the Fallouts that they did and all that stuff. But there's still more games that they could theoretically get on the service. So I'm curious to see what happens with this. I think that what would be really nice for them to do now that they have, I guess, the financial stability or whatever you want to call it, over on the Activision side, and Xbox has shown that they are willing to kind of work with people, is I would like to see them tell Call of Duty, like, hey, we actually want you to take a year off. Like, just see what will happen with this game. Approach it from different eyes. We're going to take a year off, and maybe we're going to siphon off a couple of your studios. I don't think you need 30 studios working on this game. We're going to take some of these people and assign them to other projects and get some more games out there. Because it's a lot of talent that they've acquired, because it's not just those like key upfront titles or key upfront companies like Blizzard and Activision. You know, it's like Neversoft, which got absorbed into Blizzard, is there. Like, that's a very talented group of people. You know, so there's these smaller companies like Sledgehammer and Raven and all this stuff that they could do some cool stuff, but they've kind of been tapped into just kind of doing the rinse repeat stuff with working on Call of Duty or working on Diablo or whatever it may be, ongoing World of Warcraft stuff. I think it'd be cool to see if they could maybe talk Blizzard into giving StarCraft another shot and seeing if they could breathe some life into the RTS genre and get people excited about it again. I remember when StarCraft 2 came out, man, that hype was insane. I was not an RTS player. I prefer turn-based strategy games. I just don't have the ability to play competitive RTS games. I always enjoyed watching StarCraft be played, but it was just not my thing. But the hype was so heavy that I got StarCraft 2 on the day it came out and played a bunch of it. And I was like, I am terrible at this game, but I just want to be a part of what everybody's talking about right now. So it'd be cool to see them bring back such like a storied franchise and give it maybe a new twist, and breathe some life into it. So we'll see kind of what happens here. Christian, I know this is like the one thing that you've kind of been following along with now that it's finally done. You have any thoughts?
Finally, this is done.
Yep.
Bill Gates gets life in prison,
What?
and Phil Spencer has been sentenced to death.
No.
Call of Duty's on Netflix, and everyone's happy. And you always say that I never pay attention to the show.
You fucking high? Man, my co-host is just the peak of journalistic professionalism. But there's a little bit of a follow-up with this story, and that is a lot of people wondering what's going to happen with Bobby Kotick. Well, Bobby Kotick announced in this weird thing where he hired James Corden to come to the Activision offices so they could do a fake interview with each other. That's a whole other thing. He's going to report to Phil Spencer, but then he's going to be done at the end of the year, so he's only got a couple of months left. So he will be stepping down at the end of 2023. He's getting a massive payout. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like $400 million that he's getting as a part of this. He says, quote, "I have long said that I am fully committed to helping with the transition. Phil has asked me to stay on as CEO of ABK, reporting to him. We've agreed that I will do that through the end of 2023. We both look forward to working together on a smooth integration for our team and players." And then some kind of contextual stuff. This is from Tom Ivan's article at VGC. Kotick was the CEO of Activision from February 1991 to July 2008, when they merged Activision and Vivendi Games and turned into Activision Blizzard. He's the sole Activision Blizzard executive to hold change of control protection that will reward him financially in the event that he's replaced following a takeover. Sounds like he is going to be followed. He's had multitude of scandals. It's been really rough over there. It's bad. He is not a good person. He has made a lot of really stupid and dumb decisions, and he has really sullied the reputation of that company to the point where if they didn't have the games that they did, they would not be worth that much money because nobody would want to work with them. So the fact that he will be exiting the company, I am sure he will not be exiting the industry. He will probably get some type of consultant job. But, you know, I don't think video games is really his passion. He's just kind of a business guy, right? He started off in tech, but he didn't really start off with games. I think he did some game work At one point, he was trying to turn like Commodore computers into gaming systems or something like that. So there's probably some seed of video game intrigue in his life at one point, but he definitely just kind of comes across as just a business guy. That's not necessarily a bad thing. There are plenty of people that don't care about the industry that they are in, but they are very good at running a business. So they happen to run a business in an industry of which they don't really have the passion for, but they're just good at doing it. And to some degree, he was good at doing it because he did grow that company. He just was a shit person along the way. So I wouldn't be surprised if he exits and kind of does the Reggie route from Nintendo, where he's just a consultant for other companies, not necessarily for video games. Because I mean, look at Reggie. Reggie was what? He was Pizza Hut, I think was his thing. I think he was like the Pizza Hut guy before coming over to Nintendo. So that'll probably be what ends up happening with good old Bobby there. But him getting out of the picture is definitely good news. Not to leave Sony out, Sony announced the PlayStation 5 Slim is coming out next month in November. There will be a version with a disc drive and a digital version that can also have a attachable disc drive connect to it. Same price for the regular PS5 Slim, but a $50 increase for the discless version, so it'll be $450, and then you can buy that attachable hard drive. I believe that is $80 that you could put onto it. So the Slim PS5 will have a terabyte of storage, and that's about it. It's obviously a different form factor, different size. There's no change to the controller. No change to the internals. This is not a PS5 Pro by any stretch of the imagination. Nothing seems to be changing there. Just the different size, different aesthetical look, and that hard drive space is a little bit of a bump. But you'll still be able to do the same stuff that you could do. You could put in a new hard drive if you want with an M.2 drive, which I definitely recommend if you're playing video games a lot. I've had to do that with both of my consoles. I had to expand PlayStation storage and Xbox storage, especially over the past 6 months or so, where I have really kind of stopped playing my PlayStation all that much. Having Spider-Man come out this week will be the first time I will be really digging into playing my PlayStation 5 on a regular basis in quite some time. So it's it's nice. It's going to ultimately replace the systems. They said pretty much once the stock runs out of the original systems that are on the market right now, the only thing you'll be able to buy is the Slim. And then I assume, because it's just kind of the way things have been going, we'll get a Pro version at some point. I still think a Pro version for either system is a really dumb idea, because we have just barely started to scratch the surface of what these systems can do, because especially on the Xbox side, they are really hamstrung by having to have those games run on the Series S. With the PlayStation side, because it was so hard to get a PlayStation for such a long time, and they really wanted to support the PS4 for as long as possible because it was such a successful system for them, a lot of games had to have a PS4 version alongside that PS5 version. We're starting to see that separate now. Once again, with Spider-Man, it is not having a PS4 version, is straight PS5, so we get to see what Insomnia gets to do with having full reign of the power of the PS5. But the amount of PS5 like actual exclusive games that really tap into the power of a system like this is not very long, and the same can be said for the Xbox as well. So I think having a Pro upgrade when the system does not feel long in the tooth is very strange, especially because now at this point we're coming up on 3 years of the system being out, and it still feels like there hasn't been that much done with it. So to have a potential Pro system looming over the horizon in the next year or two just seems like such an odd choice. I think when the PS4 Pro came out, like that was kind of a needed thing at that point. There were some games coming out. I remember people playing like that God of War, the original, the two new God of Wars, and they were putting it into like a base PS4, and it sounded like a jet engine going off. Like it was very taxing on the hardware. We just don't really have that going on with these systems. So it is what it is. I'm sure they'll make their money off of it. People will run out and buy it. But I think the Slim, it's cool. That is a very big system. I have zero need or desire to go out and buy this. Doesn't interest me in the least. It looks pretty much the same. There's like a cut going across the middle. And that's about it. There's going to be a new vertical stand released. I'm at the point now where I am laying my PS5 down on its side, so I don't need to go out and get the stand, but that is going to be sold separately. I think it's like 30 bucks, something like that, I think is what they said. But yeah, new PS5 Slim coming out. Back to Xbox for a moment, and we won't spend too much time with the story because there's not much to it, but they basically said that now the deal is done. Activision Blizzard expects 2024 to be the year where they start kind of piling all their stuff onto Game Pass. They did specifically call out Diablo 4 and Modern Warfare 3, saying that they are not going to be putting either of those games out on Game Pass anytime soon, which makes sense because Diablo 4 is still making money for them, and Modern Warfare 3 is not even out yet, and they want those initial sales. But with them recently fixing servers for kind of the Xbox 360 era of Modern Warfare game or Call of Duty games, I would expect that those would probably come pretty early on to Game Pass. Stuff like that Tony Hawk remake from a couple years ago will go on. I would imagine that Diablo 3 would go on, that Diablo 2 Resurrected Edition thing would go on. I would say maybe they put StarCraft 2 on PC Game Pass. That would be kind of interesting. But beyond that, I'm not sure. I guess they could do Overwatch on Game Pass. That would make sense. But it's going to be kind of like what they did with Bethesda, where I think like day one, you're going to get, let's say 30 games ish, something like that, with the large majority of them being Call of Duty titles. And then maybe some stuff here and there. I think when that initial wave of the Bethesda stuff hit with Doom and Wolfenstein included with all that, I think that was pretty much it. Deathloop eventually came, but that was only because they had that exclusivity deal with Sony at the time. I think otherwise that would have been there on day one with the rest of those games. So, I mean, we might see this big, massive influx of these games on Game Pass, and then it just might be it for a while. Maybe they'll do some work to get some of those older titles, like I hope they would, on there. But there's a big chance that they just kind of don't, and we just kind of get this initial wave of games, and that's kind of it. But who knows? At some point, I would imagine that those first-party games, well, they will now be first-party games. Let's say if they do a StarCraft 3. Let's say they do Modern Warfare 4, whatever it may be. I would anticipate those probably coming out day one on Xbox and for sale on other platforms. Well, probably not StarCraft. It would just be on PC, but they could theoretically do a console version of that. I don't know how well RTS stuff really does on consoles. Like Halo Wars was okay, but it wasn't as fast paced as StarCraft can be. So we'll see, but I think you get to a future pretty quickly where the current Call of Duty releases day one on Game Pass. Let's see here. We got a follow-up to a story from the past couple of weeks with the whole drama with Unity, where they've kind of backtracked some of the stuff that they wanted to do to charge developers, and their CEO, John Riccitiello, has stepped down. So this article, once again, from Tom Ivan over at VGC. Unity CEO steps down following backlash over engine monetization plans. Riccitiello has been with Unity since 2014, so coming up on 10 years. James Whitehurst, who was formerly the president of IBM, is the interim CEO and president, and Rolf Botha, lead independent director of Unity's board, has been named the new chairman of the company. Riccitiello released a statement saying, "It's been a privilege to lead Unity for nearly a decade and serve our employees, customers, developers, and partners, all of whom have been instrumental to the company's growth. I look forward to supporting Unity through this transition and following the company's future success. With the company's experienced leadership and passionate employees, I am confident that Unity is well positioned to continue enhancing its platform, strengthening its community of customers, developers, and partners, and focusing on growth and profitability goals." That quote, the last one there, was from James Whitehurst, the new acting CEO and president. So to kind of give some context, Tom Ivan writes, last month, Unity announced plans to charge developers every time a game that uses its engine is installed, starting in January 2024. The proposed Unity runtime fee would apply to games that meet a minimum revenue threshold and have passed a minimum lifetime install count. This quickly led to a bunch of developers saying that they were just going to take their games off platforms, make them no longer purchasable, as it was just simply going to cost them too much money. There were some people trying to get onto other development tools, but Unity is kind of widespread for a reason. It's fairly easy to kind of pick up and learn. A lot of people know it that are in the industry, so it's a very accessible tool in that way, and a very widely adopted tool in that way, because it's not as complex perhaps as something like the current iteration of the Unreal Engine. Makes it easier for some people like kind of getting their start in video game design to make their games. And this was just going to make it too expensive. And there were concerns, well, what if somebody doesn't like my game and they just uninstall and reinstall, rinse, repeat until they just put me into the poorhouse because I can't afford to pay these runtime fees. So they did backtrack some of that stuff. You can go to past episodes of the show for more details on that, or just pop on over to VGC or Kotaku, and there's likely a write-up there detailing the whole thing. But this seemed kind of inevitable with Riccitiello stepping down. John Riccitiello has not had the greatest track record in video games. I'm sure he will pop up somewhere at some point. I think I would probably injure my ribs laughing if he comes in and takes over Activision for Xbox. I don't think they're stupid enough to do that, but man, wouldn't that be great? Speaking of things that aren't great, XDefiant continues to be delayed again. So XDefiant initially failed certification, which isn't that big of a deal. Games fail certification all the time. But what was a big deal was they kind of went very public about it. They have been very cagey about putting out a release date. They initially just said September, some point in September 2023 is when the game is going to come out. They had multiple tests for the game. I played in one earlier this year. I think the game played fine. It was interesting enough that I will play it when it comes out. But they have now kind of officially delayed it. So let's see here. This was from the game's official Twitter account. It says, "Thank you to everyone who participated in our recent public test session and continues to stand alongside us as we build XDefiant. The PTS public test session once again showed us your appreciation for our fast-paced game or gunplay, uniquely crafted maps, objective-driven modes, I cannot talk today, an iconic faction roster. But it also surfaced some inconsistencies in the game experience that we need to address prior to launching our preseason. So we made the hard decision to delay the preseason of XDefiant." So what's probably the smartest thing about this for them is they are aware enough to know that this game is not in a good state right now. And within the next few weeks, Modern Warfare 3 comes out. And that's all anybody's going to be playing when it comes to first-person shooters for the most part, at least competitive first-person shooters. If I was Ubisoft, I don't know if they financially can do this. I would now hold off on this game until probably January or February. Let the wave die down from Call of Duty, because once, the Christmas season hits, people get it as a gift, specifically kids get it as a gift, that kind of starts to die out January, February, and really only kind of the hardcore people are staying on at that point. And a lot of people like myself, as much as I love Call of Duty, I like to bounce from game to game. I move on, right? I'm looking for another game to play. Well, for those people that at that point, February, have had this game for 4 months, essentially, they're going to be like, well, what else is out there for a first-person shooter? Oh, XDefiant is finally out. Why don't I give that a shot? And maybe it hooks with them and they play it and support it by putting some money into it, because it is a free-to-play game. It's going to be microtransaction to hell, just like every other game is. So I think that would probably be the smartest thing for them to do. I don't know if that's actually what's going to happen, but I would say it's probably a safe bet at this point that the game probably does not come out this year. Maybe they sneak it in December, because December is very, very light on games. But I would say maybe it's a January thing. I don't know if they could quite hold out long enough, to get to February to really have Call of Duty die down and kind of carve out their own space in that first-person shooter landscape that's, out there for competitive stuff. But we shall see. Back to Activision, Bobby Kotick said that, hey, maybe Xbox is going to give us money now to make more not Call of Duty. Of course they're going to give money to make more Call of Duty. Give us money to make more Guitar Hero. Is this going to happen? No, but it's funny that it still gets brought up all the time. I highly doubt Microsoft is going to just throw money away on plastic instruments. They tried bringing both Rock Band and Guitar Hero back some years ago, and it just did not work. Nobody wanted to invest in it. It lost a lot of the charm that the original games had, and I think that point in time in the video game world has passed. It was such a cultural touchstone for a very long time. It exposed a wave of young people to music that they had never heard before. It breathed new life into bands that were much later into their career because new fans were finding them. The Rock Band Network stuff exposed people to different styles of music. You saw a lot of very, very heavy bands that in no way would ever get radio station play or anything like that, yet they found themselves on Rock Band's network. And so you could play those songs in the game, and it exposed people to much more wider varieties of music. And they're still pumping out DLC for Rock Band, as far as I know. I think they still have stuff coming out, so it's not like it's totally died, but I don't think it's going to be one of those things anymore where people are going to buy new plastic instruments. So it's just kind of funny that this gets brought up from time to time, but yeah, don't expect this one to happen, unless the only way I could see this happening is Phil Spencer is secretly a huge Guitar Hero fan and is like, guys, fuck Call of Duty. We need to get Guitar Hero on track. Move all the teams onto Guitar Hero. Let's get this done. That's the only way I really see this kind of coming into play. A couple stories left. So Cyberpunk 2077, this is kind of topical with everything that's been going on, especially with like the writer's strike with AI and all that stuff. But Cyberpunk 2077 used AI in the Phantom Liberty expansion to replace the voice actor for Victor Vector because he had passed away. They got permission from the family to do it, so they did have it, put in there. They hired another voice actor to record all the lines and then use software to kind of take his delivery and his voice and turn it into this actor's voice. I am going to really pronounce his name wrong. Mitoghost Raychek. He was a popular Polish voice actor. He did the Polish language voice for Victor Vector. So if you played the game in America, you probably didn't hear his performance. But I think what this kind of goes to show is that AI can be used in a positive way. They got permission from the family to do it. So the family got a paycheck, that new voice actor got a paycheck, and then the company that's making the AI got a paycheck, and it all kind of worked out well. I don't think this is going to become a widespread thing just yet. I'm sure at some point it will. But I think that this is kind of like a weird, unique situation where they were able to do this and show that there are positives to this AI voice tech. Not everything is just kind of straight the devil with it. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that there. There's really nothing else to the story besides that. But it's interesting to say that despite all of this having some positive benefit to it, somebody that works within CD Projekt, their localization director, Mikotaj Swed, he did not like this approach at all, but not really his decision. So it's going to be divisive, and it's not just going to be divisive with us fans and consumers of these games and movies where it could potentially come into play, but it's divisive within the companies that are making the decisions to do this. It's one of those things where the technology is there and the technology exists, but we as a society, I guess, in a way, have not really decided, do we like this or do we not like this? It could end up being one of those things where it kind of goes the way of that hologram stuff. They tried doing those holograms, then they did like the Ronnie James Dio one, the Tupac one. And a lot of people thought that that was going to be like the next big thing, where they were going to get these holograms of dead musicians and do these new musical performances. And for the large part, that's kind of just not happened. I hear every once in a while one popping up here and there, but it has not become a widespread practice in the industry. And as of right now, I don't think it's going to be a widespread practice just yet. Is it coming? Yeah, it's coming. I think AI is kind of inevitable at this point in video games. And, you know, we'll see with the contracts with the Writers Guild, you know, who knows, maybe they can push that off a little bit, but writers don't really get a say in casting, right? So it's going to be a whole separate issue when they decide, like, hey, for this animated movie, we're just going to get an AI voice to do the voice. That's a very real possibility. So it's a touchy subject, but, you know, I think it's a good early example of what's kind of going on with this. So sad news that he passed away. It sounded like he was a very well-respected Polish voice actor, but I guess some positive in the fact that, you know, his performance gets to live on, and you know, it was handled in a fairly tactful way. So the last story I had, this actually doesn't affect video games, but it very may well in the future. Best Buy announced that they are discontinuing sales of physical media in stores and on their website in early next year. They did say that this does not affect video games. It is just DVDs and Blu-ray discs. I want to see if it's going to affect vinyl as well, because Best Buy, at least my Best Buy, has vinyl in it. So we'll see if that ends up happening. It's kind of interesting timing, because just a couple weeks ago, Netflix mailed out its final DVD. They have gotten out of the DVD mailing business, which is kind of what got them started. I remember getting the little red envelopes in the mail. But yeah, I think having physical media go away from Best Buy, it's you know, it's Best Buy. If you've been into Best Buy lately, you know, it looks very different than it did just 5-6 years ago. You know, I remember buying a lot of Blu-rays and DVDs at Best Buy. I bought a lot of stuff. It was nice. We had at one point we had 3 Best Buys in this area, and each one kind of had a different selection. It was kind of nice, and you know, they weren't that far away where you could, if you wanted to, you could go to all 3 within 2 hours, you know, and shop around. But I bought a lot of Blu-ray stuff there. I used to be really big into collecting physical movies. I was working at a video game store, and we could buy movies. I think as employees, our DVD cost was like $1 or something like that. And I ended up racking up, I think I got up close to a couple thousand movies. And then I ended up getting rid of all of them. But I mean, I had a lot. I still have a ton. I think I probably stopped a couple years ago. The last physical thing that I bought for a movie, I want to say, was when Arrow did their like super duper edition of Donnie Darko. I think that was like 2019 or 2020 maybe. And that was the last one I got. When I got into 4K movies, I was buying a lot of 4K movies physically, because there wasn't anything that was really streaming them at that time in great quality, where now that there is. In our local vinyl record store here in town, they were selling 4K movies for like dirt cheap. I remember it was like when It came out. It was like 2 weeks after the movie had come out. Somebody had already traded it in, probably stolen, to be honest. And they were selling it for like $10 on 4K. And I was like, yeah, I'll pick that up for $10. So I was buying them for a little while. But it just got to the point where, you know, the disc drive in the PS5 and the Xbox Series X are not great at playing movies. You're not getting full-fledged all the bells and whistles. And with streaming services, you are these days, especially stuff like Bravia Core, which that's their whole thing, is the ultimate experience streaming, and those movies look incredible. I have zero complaints with the way stuff looks like on Disney Plus or Netflix. HBO, hit or miss at times, but I think the Mac stuff is pretty good. So it's gotten to the point where I just don't feel the need I need to have physical movies anymore. Now, obviously this sucks because it's less incentive for movie studios to put their movies out on physical media. And I'm sure over the next few years, we're probably going to stop seeing mainstream movies released on disc, and they'll be digital only. But you're still going to have your boutique stuff like Vinegar Syndrome in Arrow. Mondo, I think, has done some movies. And that's still going to exist, but it's going to be a situation probably over the next 10 years where there's just going to be some movies you can't get. They're not out on physical, and they're not on streaming, and they're just not produced. You would have to go back and buy a VHS copy, because there's still stuff that, you know, as much that went to DVD, there's still stuff that didn't go to DVD, and there's even less that went to Blu-ray, and far, far, far less that went to 4K. So it's going to become to the point where it's like, well, I guess the only way to watch this movie is to buy a VCR and this VHS copy. And now we're getting close to 40 years potentially after this VHS was made. Like, what's the condition going to be? So I imagine there's probably going to be some grassroots archival stuff going on with people trying to get digital rips of these long lost movies, especially in like the horror genre. That kind of is what, drives a lot of this, you know, most of the time. But yeah, it's sad, but I'm curious to see what they're going to fill that space with at Best Buy. Because at least at my Best Buy, it's still a few racks of space. I don't know, maybe they just do more phone accessories, more computers, whatever it may be. But yeah, it's a sad day to see this stuff kind of start to phase out. But that's going to wrap up the show for this week. So what's going on the channel this week? So tomorrow will be that Call of Duty beta video. I've got to record that in a little while here. And then Friday is Spider-Man. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with Spider-Man. I don't know if I'm just going to stream it or I'm going to film a video and put it up on Saturday. You know, I'm not sure when I'm going to get the game. I decided to get a physical version for whatever reason. I think the reason why I got the physical version is because I had enough rewards points at GameStop to get it for nothing, essentially. So that's why I went with that, because I think if I had the digital version, I could have gotten it at midnight. But even then the video wouldn't have been right on. It's the whole thing. But sometimes the GameStop by me does stuff where you can get it the night before at 9 p.m. So it's possible that I could get it and install it quick enough and then play a little bit of it and have a video up on Friday morning. I doubt that though. But we'll kind of see what they have to say about that. But there will definitely be something Spider-Man related. But yeah, that's kind of the only stuff I have really planned for this week. There is another game that came out that I haven't gotten a chance to play yet. It just came out a couple days ago, and that's Star Trek Infinite, which is Paradox's Star Trek grand strategy game that is essentially the Stellaris mod turned into a full-fledged game. It is getting torn apart in the reviews. Apparently is not very good. But I'm a big enough Star Trek fan that I do want to check it out. I have it installed. I just haven't gotten a chance to play it yet. I'm going to play that on my own time. If it is interesting enough, maybe I'll make a video out of it, but probably not, because that stuff, I tend to not do very well in videos where I'm playing like strategy games. I've tried it in the past where I've recorded them and then watched them back, and I was like, I cannot put this up. It's just too bad. Which you can probably say with the most of the stuff on this channel, why would I put this up? But I think it's kind of going to be one of those things where maybe I just play it and talk about it on this show next week. But we'll see how all that plays out. But other than that, that's going to wrap things up for me. Christian, you got any parting words for the audience before we head out?
We done now? Good. I've got a shipment of hot American Coca-Cola that needs to get across the Rainbow Bridge. I've become a very big player in the Hamilton, Ontario beverage smuggling scene.
If you get arrested across the border, I am not coming to help you. I don't give enough of a shit to come and rescue you from Canada, my home and native land. Not really. I'm from America, but you know, I've been to enough hockey games where I know their national anthem. Yeah, that's going to do it for us, and see you again real soon.